is getting strapped into his, in quote, electric chair. But he is actually the confederate of the experimenter. He's in another room and he pretends to be hurt, yelling, screaming. In fact, it's all tape recorded, so it's standardized for every participant. And so the study begins, and when the learner gets it wrong, the teacher presses the first button 15 volts, but it's mild, nothing happened. But then the learner keeps making more and more mistakes, and he keeps raising 15, 30, 45, 100, 300. And when he gets to 300, the learner begins to scream. And in every case, these are good people. The teacher turns the experiment and says, I don't want to go on. I don't want to hurt anybody. I'm not a bad person. The learner says, you have agreed to be the teacher in this demonstration, in this experiment. You must continue. And in fact, they got paid, I'm trying to remember, a small amount. It was way back, maybe $5 a day. And in the study were all men ages 20 to 50 years old. So these are men living in New Haven, Connecticut. That's on the East Coast of the United States. It's where Yale University is. And it's where I actually did my graduate training. So before Milgram began, he described his study as I described to you, and he asked 40 psychiatrists at the Yale Medical School what percent of all Americans would go all the way up to 450 volts, which is the maximum. And they said only 1%. To do so, you would have to be a psychopath. They were wrong, because the research showed that 65% went all the way. 2 of every 3 people in that study went all the way. It was in quote shocking. It was astounding. And so what I did for you is I made up this graph. Milgram tested more than 1,000 people. The study only took 1 hour for each person. And he did 16 different variations. In each one, there were 25, 50, or even 100 people. And on the left, you see the left axis is the percentage administering 450 volts. And there are 16 variations that you can read at the bottom of each one. Now, curiously, in study 1, if the learner says, I want to be shocked, I don't really care, the teacher doesn't shock at all. It's not even 1%, because that's crazy. But now as I should mention, in study 13 in the middle, he did do one group of women. He tested one group of women as teachers and learners, and there women performed the same as men in this scenario. But for me, the most important thing is comparing study 16 with study 5. In study 16, you come in, you sit down, and the experimenter tells you to wait. He said, we're running a little late. And what you see before you is somebody like you, similar in background, similar in age, also a male or female, go all the way to 450 volts. Now it's your turn. Under those circumstances, obedience goes up to 91%. Go back down. In study 5, you sit down, experiment says we're running a little late. You see 2 people like you say, I don't want to go on, this is wrong, and quit, walk out. Now it's your turn. Under those circumstances, obedience drops to 10%. So the important issue, and this is what Milgram highlights, is blind obedience is manipulable. It's variable depending on elements of the social situation. And that's why, so Milgram was one of the first people to emphasize the importance of the social situation. Now, here's a picture of Stanley Milgram, and that's literally his famous shock box. And I want to say all evil begins with 15 volts. Now, imagine you are a participant you're sitting in front of this box. When the experiment says begin, if you press that first 15 volts, you know you're on a slippery slope of evil. Why would there be so many buttons? Why would there be 30 switches if they didn't expect anybody to go all the way there? So the important thing is not to press the first button. not to do the 15 polls. And I asked Milgram, how many of the 1,000 people you tested refused, said, I'm not pressing that first button? The answer is 0. No one said, I don't want to press the first button because if I do, I might end up doing terrible things. In fact, in the Nazis that Milgram was concerned about, he was a Jewish boy, and what he said was, but the 15 volts for the Nazis were all Jews had to wear a yellow star of David. And so it didn't seem like a big deal, but it singled them out from everybody else who was a non-Jew. And then it increased. Jews could not go to school. Jews had restricted housing. Jews couldn't work. And then finally, Jews were sent to concentration camps. And the ultimate 450 volts is Jews were exterminated. Now, I should mention a curious fact that little Stanley Milgram and little Phil Zimbardo were in the same high school class in Bronx, New York. And this is a graduation picture. So that's me in the middle. I'm wearing a jacket, and that's Milgram. He literally was a little kid at the far side. And the last thing I want to mention about that is I can remember so it's 1949. It's not that many years from the end of the World War. And so, we're high school. We're like dumb high school kids. And for a guy, I just wanted to have a good date with that pretty girl at the end on a Saturday night. And Milgram is concerned, could the Holocaust happen again in America? And it was a Stanley, lighten up. And he said, well, could it? And we all said, Stanley, we're not that kind of people. We're Americans. And then he said, I still remember all these years, how do you know what you would do until you're in the same situation? He said, I would bet the Nazi Jugend, the Nazi youth, said the same thing before they got involved being one of the Hitler's henchmen. So I want to switch now to a classic example of situational evil that I created, that many of you know about. It's the Stanford prison experiment. And I was at Stanford University, which is in the West Coast of America, as Yale is on the East Coast of America. And so I put an ad in the newspaper, a local newspaper, and it said, male college students needed for psychological study of prison life, you get $15 a day for 1 to 2 weeks, beginning August 14th. 75 people answered the ad. They came down to my lab, as you can see this picture. We gave them a battery of personality tests, clinical interviews, and we picked 24 who were the most psychologically normal, physically healthy. And then we randomly assigned half to be guards, half to be prisoners. So that is the independent variable. That's what makes this demonstration an experiment. It's this random assignment into the two categories of prisoner and guard. Now, the study is done in 1971. This is way before your time, but what was happening historically in 1971? It was the Vietnam War, America's immoral, illegal war against the Vietnamese people. And students and me, I was an anti-war activist. And many times I encourage students to go on strike. And in many cases, the administration of the university, and not only Stanford, but many universities in America, called the police onto the campus to quell the riots. And there were physical confrontations between police and students. And at least in one university, students were killed by the police. So when we asked each one of these participants, would you rather be a prisoner or a guard? 0 said guard. Guards are like pigs. Police are pigs, guards are like that. And so that it's really important, because it meant there were not people who became guards who had sadistic impulses that were going to express when they got into this study. So this is what the guards look like, and this is what the prisoners look like. The guards came down the day before, and I went with them to a Army Navy supply store, and they each picked out their own uniform they could be proud of. and with symbols of power, billy club, whistle, handcuffs. And the other thing was all guards and me and my staff, I had 2 graduate students, Craig Haney, Kurt Banks, and undergraduate, David Jaffe. That David Jaffe played the role of warden. I would play the role of superintendent, and my graduate students played the role of, in quote, lieutenants. But we all wore those glasses to dehumanize the connection between us and them. It's an idea I got from the movie Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman. It's a great movie. You should see, one of the best movies about crime and punishment. On the other side is a picture of the prisoners. They had smocks, really dresses with a number. They had to become their number. That's called De-Individuation. And again, in the 70s, all guys had really long hair. In fact, there was a musical called Hair. So in real prisons, what they would do is they shave your head. But we did instead, we had them all wear nylon stocking cap. And the study began, but in a dramatic way. I had arranged with the local Palo Alto Police Department to arrest each student who's going to be a guard in our category of a prisoner. We had told them wait in a dormitory or wait at some assigned place. And then a policeman comes, tells them that they're wanted for violation of breaking and entering, armed robbery, puts them in a police car, handcuffs, puts them in a police car, brings them down to the police station where they are booked as if they were real prisoner. And then my graduates, and they put a blindfold on, and my graduate students come and put them into our experiment in the basement of the psychology department. So this is what the basement looks like. And I'll show you a little video in a moment to get a better feeling. It's just a corridor. And then we took the doors off the wall. We built these simulated prison cells. And at the beginning, the guards had the prisoners do jumping jacks, menial tasks. And over time, it got more humiliating, more degrading. The key to the whole study was, at the end of day 1, I told my graduate students, nothing's happening. I'm going to end the study tomorrow. We wasted a lot of time. But on the morning of the second day, the prisoners barricaded themselves in their cells, in one cell. They found a rope and they tied it around these bars, and they wrapped it around the leg of their bed so that the guards could not open it. And then the prisoners started screaming at the guards, cursing them. And the guards, then what happened is the guards came to me and said, what are we going to do? I said, it's your prison. What do you want to do? They said, let's call all the guards on all the shifts, 12 guards. So there were 3 guards, worked 8-hour shifts. There were 3 prisoners in each of 3 cells. And so 12 guards came. They broke down the door. There was a physical confrontation. They stripped the prisoners naked. In fact, in some cases, they tied them up, put some in solitary confinement. And at that point, one of the guards said, these are dangerous prisoners. And that flipped. That went from a prison simulation to a sense of this is a real prison, and these are real prisoners, and prisoners are dangerous, and we have to dominate them. And after that, prisoners were often stripped naked. They were sexually degraded, and the guards really abused the prisoners. The first prisoner to be arrested was 8612, Doug Corpy. I still remember his name. And he broke down from the extreme stress reaction that the guards imposed on him. He was the ringleader of the rebellion, so the guards singled him out for abuse. And he broke down in 36 hours. And then he became a model of how to get out by breaking down. And each day thereafter, another prisoner broke down until in 5 days, 5 prisoners had to be released. So I ended the study after 6 days rather than wait for the whole 2 weeks because it had spun out of control. And I'll tell you in a moment, and a little later, who was the hero who forced me to end the study earlier. So the study. There's been a 2015 movie called Stanford Prison Experiment, which is a very good movie. I was a consultant on it. But earlier there was a movie in England, a BBC movie about the study.
In 1971, Phil Zimbardo conducted a revolutionary experiment here in the bowels of Stanford University in the United States. It rocked the world of psychology. A group of students were divided randomly into prisoners and guards and lived in a makeshift jail. The prisoners immediately became submissive, and the guards became cruel. Within a week, Phil Zimbardo's prison was inhumane, and the experiment had to be cut short.
So before I get to this, before I switch from that evil to the Heroic Imagination Project, which is going from evil to good, I have to mention one thing. As this study went from being ordinary, everyday kind of event, there was a young guy who was playing a prisoner. I mean, a young guy who was the head of the night shift guards. His name was David Eshelman. He was 18 years old. He was a freshman in college. He was the youngest one, but he was a big guy. And what he said was, nothing was happening. He said it was boring. I got 8 hours to kill. He said later, because at the end of the study, we had everybody write their reflection. He said, nothing was happening. He said, so I was going to make it happen on my shift. And then he said, I was going to be like a puppeteer, and the prisoners were going to be my puppets. And I was going to make them do things, whatever I wanted. Just take a moment and think about what that means psychologically. That here is a young college student, educated, who now says, I am a puppeteer, and these prisoners who are other college students, and could, by a flip of the coin, you could have been in their shoes and then in yours. I'm going to make them do things. And the things he made them do were horrible, despicable, even simulating sodomy in 5 days. So let's get rid of evil. And now my Heroic Imagination Project is how I reinterpreted and reimagined the idea of the bad barrel. So what is a hero? A hero is anyone who acts on behalf of others in need or in defense of a moral cause. It's heroic because there's a risk. You could get hurt if you challenge authority, if you blow the whistle on corruption in a business. It could affect your finances, your career. The difficulty in doing research on heroes is whenever someone does a heroic deed, they always underestimate it. They say they're always humble and modest. They say, no, I did what anyone could do. Don't think of me as a hero. The problem is that we have this view of heroes as extraordinary people around the world, of Nelson Mandela in South Africa, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Madame Curie. We have people whose their names ring bells, that they are unique and that they have devoted their whole life to a cause. And in fact, in some cases, they devoted their whole life to a cause, and they were murdered. So moral courage is at the core of heroic action. When we think about soldiers in battle who are heroes, it's bravery. Bravery is at the core of their heroic action. And sadly, they usually die in the act of doing heroic deeds, saving their fellow soldiers. So let's inspire all youth globally to become what I call everyday heroes. So the question is, are these our only heroes? So again, going back when I was a little kid in the hospital in New York, that was the time in 1939 that Superman comics first appeared. And so yeah, I was a skinny little kid. Yeah, that was my role model. Big muscles, bullets bounce off of him. And then over time, every year there were more superheroes. And then mostly there were men at first, but now they're Wonder Woman, there's Superwoman, there's Spider-Man now. And so the world for all of us has been filled with superheroes. The thing about superheroes, they can only do one extraordinary thing. And in fact, I argue, and I'm talking to high school students, I want you to imagine that every one of these superheroes that you admire admires you back because you have something they don't have. What could it be? You have a brain. They are the brainchild of a cartoonist. So no, They are not our heroes. And the point is, given that you have this incredible gift of this brain, your job in life is to use that brain wisely and well to become an everyday hero. So I promote this new conception of heroes is 3Ds, democratize. Anyone can be a hero. Men, women, young, old. It's not in you, it's an action you take that makes the world better in some way. And I want to demystify it. You don't need to have special inequalities. You don't have to come from a certain kind of family. And again, the typical notion of heroes is always an individual. In fact, it starts in Greek mythology with Odysseus, Agamemnon, Ulysses. But even the modern ones, as I said, Martin Luther King, are always individuals. And I'm saying, no, I want to promote the ideas of individuals working in teams. I call it ensemble heroes, pro-social networks. So together, you can be more powerful than any one individual. So why do we need heroes? Heroes shift the social norm from being passively complying to pro-social action. True heroes put their best selves forward in service to all of humanity, and they represent ideals that every one of us can aspire to. Next are some real-life heroes in action. So I interviewed Barack Obama just before he became president of the United States some decades ago. And I asked him, do heroes have to be special people? And I said, you are a hero, obviously, to African-American people. And later on, his wife, Michelle, was a hero. And so I said, do heroes have to be special people? And I want you to listen to his answer, which is really brilliant. And he says several themes that I want to build on for the rest of my talk.
You know, what's remarkable about history is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Last year Rosa Parks passed away, and I remember sitting on this stage with world leaders and Bill Clinton and senators and governors and thinking we were all paying homage to a seamstress who had transformed the country and helped transform the world. We never know sort of how our actions are going to ripple over time. But each of us can take some responsibility for making sure that we are pushing a little bit in the direction of justice and in the direction of equality and the direction of tolerance. And when we do that, we may surprise ourselves with the amount of influence that, in fact, we have just by standing up or speaking up.
So the key is each of us has to be willing to stand up and speak out for a moral cause, promoting equality between people, between men and women, between races, between ethnicities, and be willing to take action to transform an idea into action. And then what he says is, when you act and other people observe your heroic action, you create a ripple effect. You increase the likelihood that they will do that. So a simple case is, when I grew up in New York, we never, as a kids, we always ran the red lights. So it didn't matter if the light was red or green, we ran across the street, and sometimes endangering your life because cars are coming the other way. But when you do a good thing, when you wait on the corner until the light turns from red to green, other people wait with you. When you take a risk, when you violate the law, run the light, then other kids would do the same. So he says, you have a ripple effect for good or for bad, and become aware that each of us has the power to influence other people or observe our behavior for better or for worse. So who is Rosa Parks? Oops. 1 second, come on. So this is a picture of Rosa Parks. She was an attractive African-American woman. She made dresses or seams, they call it seamstress, or altered dresses for rich ladies in Montgomery, Alabama, which is the South of America. She became the first lady of civil rights in the United States. Why? In those days, when you got on a bus or a train, it was marked whites only, colored only. They call them colored, not black. And so colored people had to sit in the back of the bus. In fact, they had to enter the bus from the back door rather than the front door. And she was doing that for years. One day, she refused to give up a seat to a white man. And the bus driver stopped, called the police. They arrested her. And here's her picture. She became prisoner of the state, prisoner 7053. But she started a social movement that ultimately led to a new law that no transportation, buses or trains in America could ever again be desegregated. Now, I want you to notice there's an African-American man in the corner there. He is Martin Luther King Jr. So he used her experience to start a social movement. And what that was is very practical. When she got out of prison, all blacks in Montgomery, Alabama said, we will never use a bus or a train again. We will walk to work. We will have a carpool. We will help each other get to work. And so it was economic. The whites in Montgomery, Alabama, the buses and trains were going broke. The people own that. And so that started the movement in a very practical way. And then they appealed, they got the lawyers to appeal to the Congress of the United States to desegregate buses and trains. The other real life hero her name is Christina Maslak. She was my graduate student at Stanford University, graduated in 1971, and she now had a job as a professor at a new professor at University of California in Berkeley. And we had begun dating, and we were thinking maybe if it works out well, we could get married and have a family. Now, when I was doing the study, I lived there. I mean, I lived in my office on the second floor. I slept there. So I never left the psych department. And she called me one day and said, hey, I haven't seen you for almost a whole week. How about I come down Thursday night and we have a late night dinner together? So I said, great. She came down, and now what's happening, she's looking at the TV screen, which is the camera is focused on the yard. And what she sees is it's 10 o'clock at night, and it's what we call the 10 o'clock toilet run. It was the last time prisoners could go to a toilet, because after that, they had to urinate or defecate in buckets in their cell, which they hated because it smelled terrible. So, but the guards on the night shift, including this David Eshelman, used this as an opportunity to dehumanize, dominate the prisoners. First, they put paper bags over their heads. Secondly, they put chain their legs from leg to leg. And this is not any instruction I gave. This was their own diabolical deeds. And then they started pushing them and yelling and cursing at them. And when Christina came down, I'm looking at the screen and I'm taking notes. And she looks at that and she begins to tear up. And I said, what's the matter? She says, I can't look at this. And she runs out, and I run after her. We're standing in the courtyard outside, the courtyard of the psychology building. And she said, these are not prisoners. These are not guards. These are students. And you have a reputation of loving students, and students love you. But you have changed. You know, I don't think I want to continue our relationship if this is the real you. And so she never told me to end the study, but she brought me to my senses to say that in the role I had, I made a mistake of being the prison superintendent. I should have only been the principal investigator. In that role, I allowed cruelty and inhumanity. And so the evil situation had changed me. So that's how powerful that was. And so we went to dinner, and I said, okay, I'm going to end the study tomorrow. I have to figure out how to do it. And then if you read my book, The Lucifer Effect, I describe how I did it. And there's a chapter on each day and a chapter on how we ended the study. And then, of course, we had a whole day of debriefing. We had all the prisoners get together after we told them the study's over for 2 hours to share their experience, all the guards to share their experience, and then prisoners and guards together. And then I brought them all back together a week later, a month later. And I should mention there were no lasting negative effects on anybody of prisoners and guards. In fact, Doug Corpy, prisoner 8612, the first one to break down, it changed his whole life. He became a clinical psychologist. He did his dissertation, his PhD, on the shame of prisoners and the guilt of guards. And for his entire life, he became a prison psychologist in a San Francisco County prison, and trying to make prisoners and guards work better together than be enemies. So that's a really positive effect of our study. So I started back in 2010 something called the Heroic Imagination Project, or HIP. We're a nonprofit organization. We teach people, especially young people, how to stand up, how to speak out, how to take action to change your world for the better. And so this is our new symbol that I just made. The middle, of course, is the psi symbol. So it's HIP, HIP. Our approach is based on the premise that ordinary people, like any of us, are capable of taking extraordinary action. And the whole idea is to act wisely and to act well. So we're a unique educational program, as I said, based on applying everything I know in social psychology and cognitive psychology to create these lessons. And our lessons are module-based, and they're for ages 13 to adults. We're now in colleges and high schools, in corporation, public organization, community groups. We hope to now also have our programs in police training. Many of you know about the Black Lives Matter, the abuses of policemen to Black people all over America. So we want to train police cadets in our lessons and in prisons. So these are some of our lessons. So the first is transforming, at the top right-hand column, transforming passive bystanders into active upstanders. So we show videos of bystander situations, and then we tell you how you could act, how you should act. Another one is transforming people who have a static fixed mindset into a dynamic growth mindset. There's a book by my colleague at Stanford, Carol Dweck, called Mindsets, which is just brilliant. And we teach people how to have this dynamic mindset to say, everything about you can be improved with two things: practice and effort. And then this third lesson we have is prejudice and intergroup conflict, how to transform bias and discrimination into understanding and acceptance of people who are different from you. And so in some countries, it's being Jewish. In some countries, it's being Black. In some countries, it's Roma people. So our lessons then are translated into many different languages to make them appropriate. So a student a graduate student in Hungary made this incredible cartoon, which describes, after I gave a lecture, describes what the program is, and then introduces the bystander effect. So I'd like you to take a minute, just it's 2 minutes altogether, this very dramatic cartoon.
Hello, I'm Phil Zimbardo, president and founder of the Heroic Imagination Project. Our main focus is promoting the idea that heroes are ordinary people who take extraordinary action in challenging situations in their lives. Effective heroes do the right thing when other people are doing the wrong thing, or more often when they're doing nothing, and also to expose evil in all of its many forms as a whistleblower. We believe heroism begins in the mind, begins with thinking about yourself as a hero, thinking about yourself as having an inner hero that we will help express through our lessons, our ways of rethinking the nature of good and evil. Transforming bystander apathy into heroic action. Bystander apathy is what characterizes what's known as the bystander effect. In emergency situations, the more people present, paradoxically, the less likely anyone's to help. That's called the bystander effect. It was generated many years ago by the brutal murder in New York City of the woman Kitty Genovese, where many people heard her screams and did nothing. As soon as one person helps, then in seconds, that help is expanded. Our message is be the one. Be that person who ignores the social norm of doing nothing and creates a new social norm of doing something.
Yeah. So again, I should mention the power of cartoons. We don't use cartoons enough in our education, but we have shown that this cartoon is remembered better than anything else in my speech. So it would be good to think of how can we, as psychologists, work with people in media labs to learn how to use cartoons to promote our lessons. Now, I also did a program in London called The Human Zoo. And in this program, I created a number of situations to illustrate the things I'm talking about now. And one of them was we went to a very busy place in London called Liverpool Station, where trains pull in and out. So there are always hundreds and hundreds of people. And we staged an event. And here we had a young woman, attractive woman, well-dressed, pretending to be unconscious, lying on the steps. And the idea was how soon before somebody helped her. Just said, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" And what you're going to see is there's a clock starting when we start the video, and how many people pass by before somebody helps.
Our actress Ruth takes Peter's place. She's not a drunk, but she's also not a city gent. How long before she gets help? Minutes have passed, and 34 people have passed.
People don't really want to know that they just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
But it's more complicated than that. If the street were deserted, a passerby would probably go to the rescue. But these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't help. This woman, for instance, has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps. She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
First I thought she was dead, then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her, because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
So again, it's the bystander effect is really amazing. It's that the more people present when there's any emergency, the less likely anyone is to help. So it creates a negative norm, a norm of do nothing. Usually we think of social situation where somebody does something, and that's the norm of to follow the leader. So it's not following a leader. And so partly what we want to teach people is, including young people, is here's a case in which you have to ignore the group and take action. It's something that many of us are reluctant to do, but someone's life might be at hand. And it's enough to simply say, are you all right? Do you need help? And and also if there are other people there, you could say, you call emergency, you call a hospital, you call the police. So what can you do? When one person stops in any emergency, immediately all others join in. You break the norm of doing nothing to make a new norm of doing something. So the power of one, be that person. Don't expect other people to do it. And always imagine it was you, or imagine it was somebody in your family or a close friend lying there. Power of two, be an ally, support those in need. The power of many, create, as I said earlier, pro-social networks, hero squads. Act socially, be sociocentric. The enemy of heroism is egocentricity. We only think about ourselves. It's I and me. And we want you to act wisely, act well, and act often. So focus on others. Practice, make someone else feel special every day. What does that mean? Learn and use other people's names that you meet. Follow that by giving a genuine compliment. A compliment could be how they look, but also what they do. You could say, that was really interesting. That was a smart idea. I really like that. And then remember what we said with Obama. What is your ripple effect? Remember that your actions and inactions make a difference. And again, it's change. It's really all about, that's why I say it's heroic imagination. It's thinking, it's using that brain wisely and well. Change your perspective. Me becomes we, I becomes us. So as I said earlier, our program is in many countries around the world. Curiously, we're only in the West Coast of the United States. Given I'm a New Yorker, I got to get our training on the East Coast. But our program is all over Hungary. In Hungary, they formed their own foundation called Hero Square, and they get many volunteers who take our lessons. So I did training in Budapest of many teachers, and then now they go in every city around Hungary. So we're in 1,000 schools all over. We are beginning to be in London. We are in Porto, Portugal. We're all over Poland. We're in Sicily. I'm going to describe that immediately. In Tehran, and a big program in Prague in the Czech Republic. Now, the interesting thing about, I told you I'm Sicilian. The interesting thing about our program there is that if you remember some years ago, I'm not sure, my memory, 5-7 years ago, there was a huge migration of Africans coming to Europe. There was poverty, there was hunger, and many migrants got on rubber boats and to go across the sea to Europe, and many nations did not allow them in, blocked the entry, and they simply wanted to come, start a new life, get jobs. The Sicilian government, however, did something really unusual. They said, we will allow a certain number of African youth to come. We will give them housing. We will give them education. We will give them clothing. And they came to Palermo, which is the capital of Sicily. And the young women that I trained, Claudia Libero and Christina Citolo, took these young African migrants and trained them in our lessons, trained them not how to understand the lesson, and then train them how to become trainers themselves. And so here's a picture of this African Black Muslim trainer who we have trained, teaching one of our lessons to, these are middle school students. They also do a lesson in high school as well. And the other beautiful thing about it is that, so they feel that they have an important place in that society. And then we give them, let's say, like 80 euros for each lesson they teach, because it's a job, half of which they send home to their parents. So now their parents are happy that their children didn't abandon them to go to become migrants in some other nation, but their children are helping to take care of them. So it's really what we call a win-win situation. And with that, I think I come to the end of the line. If you go online, look up heroicimagination.org to see the kinds of things we're doing, get involved, support our projects. And with that, I want to thank you thank all of you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed my last visit to Turkey. I enjoyed being with students. I enjoyed students teaching me how to smoke hookah. And thanks for your attention and caring. So with that, we can open to questions or comments.
Professor Zimbardo, thank you so much. That was an amazing talk. You can also possibly stop your screen sharing. That way you can also see the gallery view of participants.
Here we are. Yay. Okay.
Excellent. Before we start with questions, I was hoping that maybe in honor of your 88th birthday coming up, that we could all serenade Professor Zimbardo and sing him a happy birthday song, but in Turkish. So
yes,
a little bit special.
That would be nice.
So maybe on the count of three, can everybody open their mics? I'm not sure if we have ability to open mics. Maybe we don't. It may be bad if I'm the only one singing here.
Let's try it.
We do, I think.
Okay, excellent. So let's give everyone a second to open your microphones. Looks like most people are opening now. And on the count of three, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. Thank you.
So wishing happy birthday.
Thank you. Wonderful.
We have lots of questions that people are being asked. So our Psychology Club officers have asked for people to submit them to a private chat so that we can kind of also review them, make sure that the questions aren't too long and that they also haven't been covered before. I'm also going to help with moderating the questions and also letting as many individuals as we can ask questions in the limited time that we have. So again, please ask those questions via private chat and keep them to one part. I know sometimes people want to ask multiple part questions. If we keep them to one, we get more questions. So we have, I believe, give me just 1 second to get to our questions here. One of the first questions that we have is from Gökberk Kaya, with a very nice question about humbleness. So if you could please unmute yourself.
Oh, hello.
Where are you?
I don't think we see Gökberk. Gökberk, are you able to unmute yourself?
I think I can now.
Okay, wonderful. Could you ask your question, please?
Where are you?
Sure. Why do you think humbleness is an important trait of a hero? Can you elaborate more on that, please? Thank you.
On being humble?
Why do you think humbleness is an important trait of a hero?
Yeah, okay. What is the opposite of humbleness? It's pride. Now, we all want to take pride in what we know. But I mean, take pride in being a psychologist, being a researcher. But pride can easily become distorted. Can become a focus on you. And to be humble is in a funny way in the Christian tradition is that, you know, Christ was humble, you know, was a leader of people, but always always working for others rather than glorifying yourself. So the worst thing about pride is it's, you know, self-glorification. It's like, notice me, I am special. And also the implication is I am better than you. So the humbleness is a way for which people to create a sense of we are all equal. We're all in this life together. We're all trying to survive. Ideally, with my program, we're all in this world together to try to do good to help other people succeed. So I am successful as a teacher to the extent that my students succeed in life, get good jobs, have good families, and also do good in their lives. Good, really good question.
Thank you. Another question that we have, I'm sorry, I don't have the name associated with this one, but what do you think about nature or the biological side of evil and heroism? And do you think that evil and heroism can be something that people are born with? I
don't think so. I mean, obviously as social psychologists, we play down the biological, we play up the psychological, sociological, is that the only evidence of being, in quote, born evil is that there's some people who are more psychopathic, and it looks as if they don't develop the ability to feel pain they don't develop the ability to feel comparable, supportive of other people's pain. So they can look at pain and suffering of people and animals, and there's no emotional component. And so people, and that's a very small percentage of any population, maybe again 1%. That so for most of us, we have to learn how to be a human being. We have to learn how to appreciate the suffering and value the suffering of others, and especially when people suffer for a cause, and that. And it's always trying to understand why. So as psychologists, the big question is why? Why is someone doing this? Even though I might not understand, I don't understand what the cause is. But as a psychologist, I always say, why? Tell me more. Inform me. Make me an intellectual ally. Even though I might not agree with you, but at least intellectually, I can understand why you believe in this cause, this phenomenon.
Thank you. This is also a question next that we've gotten quite a bit from the forums to begin with. It's about the internet, media, and kind of the slippery slope that we have there. So the question is, do you think misuse of the internet and social media can trigger the slippery slope of evil because it provides anonymity and also dehumanization? And could this be also transferred to real life if it starts on the internet?
Yeah, so the internet is that you guys grew up with it and your generation. For me, it's something new. It was not there when I was a student, even a graduate student. Is that in one way the internet is amazing. It allows us to do what we're doing right now, which we couldn't do even maybe 10 years ago. The problem with the internet, though, is, and it's really social media, is that it allows people to share. It allows people to do negative things to other people where they are anonymous. So, for example, you could say on the internet, the reason why Pellin gets all the good grades is that he cheats or she cheats. The reason why the boys like this particular girl is because she's sexually easy, accessible. So once you say that, that's cyberbullying. You are denouncing, demeaning somebody's character, and how can they undo it? They can say it's not true, but suddenly your message can go out to thousands of people, and so cyberbullying is one of the worst aspects of the social media, and instead what we want to do is just the opposite, is to say, who has done it, who has done a heroic deed today, please share it, rather than putting down other people. So again, our program, really one of the enemies of our program is bullies, and we talk about how can anybody oppose bullies. And again, it's using this social network that a number of you get together and you confront a bully and say, what you're doing is not fair to this child, and we would like you to stop it. And if you do, we will be your friends. So here's a case where you can make a friend doing nothing, but if you continue to do it, then we're going to expose you to the teacher or the principal, etc. But we build that into our lesson.
Thank you. Another question that we have is there any specific reason or life experience that led you to change your focus from understanding evil to understanding good and heroes?
Well, the experience with Christina Maslak, who essentially made me wake up to say, wait a minute, you have created a situation which has become a hotbed of evil, and you're redefining it as the dynamics of the social situation, but it's still evil. Evil is you're doing something which allows or enables other people to suffer, other people to have power over others, to dominate, to brutalize, to be cruel. And so that got me thinking about this other side. Now, the curious thing about heroism is the word hero and heroism still does not exist in psychology textbooks. I mean, it didn't when I started 2010. I'm hoping to get more of it. I have it in my textbook, Core Concept, but it's a curious thing that hero and heroism, it's in literature books, but those are, again, as I said, Greek hero, Greek mythology. I'm actually developing a new program called Heroes in Literature, identifying many different kinds of classic heroes or modern heroes that I'm in the process of doing that. Hope to be finished within a few months. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So another question that we have is in times of Corona. So the person said that they're very interested in the Lucifer effect and was thinking about it a lot lately in the time of the coronavirus outbreak. And they would like to know how these extraordinary times bring out the Lucifer inside of all of us.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, our problem is we are now still embedded in the pandemic. Every nation around the world, some are surviving better than others, and some of them they are retreating, getting worse. I mean, more deaths every day. One of the clear consequences of pandemic is social isolation. That we are isolated in our homes. We are self-quarantined. In some places, there's a law. You can't go out in the street at a certain time. You can't go out alone at night. And so now people who are used to being social, or used to be outside with friends, with buddies, colleagues, classmates, whatever, don't have that. Now, if you are educated, you can still Zoom. And so a lot of people are spending their time Zooming. But you can only do that a certain amount of time. So for many of us, we have not learned how to deal with social isolation. And what we are seeing is a lot of negative things happening. A lot of young people are, there's an increase in young people taking drugs. There's an increase in teen suicide. There's an increase in spouse abuse. So now people who normally would only spend a short time of the day, everybody goes to work, everybody travels, everybody goes to school, now are forced to interact with each other. And in many cases, couples realize they don't really like each other that much, or they liked each other when they got married or when they started dating, but they don't do it now. And it's really a real difficulty for single mothers who now are at home, full time, can't go to work, and then obviously the negatives, don't have enough money to take care of their family, and for children, my grandson has attention deficit disorder, which means he cannot sit in front of a Zoom screen with class lessons. That is, he needs a teacher there to sit, or a classmate to sit next to him to say, okay, his nickname is Panda. Panda, pay attention. What is happening? What is that letter? What does the plus sign mean? And so he, like many other young kids, are falling behind in basic education, basic learning. So in general, the pandemic has had more negative effects with most families, with most people around the world. And I'm hoping that we will see the light of day in the fall, in September, October, where many countries will have the restrictions lifted.
Thank you. We have a question from Özyeğin. Sorry. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you that, Mr. Zimbardo, firstly, it's an honor to talk to you. What do you think about after the experiment, if the prisoners start to see each other? Do you think they meet again because they might have a big connection between them as they were in the same group?
Yeah, so I did mention is that in the experiment, these students were from many colleges around America. They were not from Stanford University. That the reason I was able to use them is they were students who were going to summer school at Stanford and at University of California, Berkeley. And I knew in those days, everybody had 2 weeks between the end of summer school and the start of the new semester. So these students didn't know each other. When the study was over, they went home, from California to the Midwest to East Coast. The other part of this, what your question is, what happened when you have 3 prisoners in a cell? One of them is beginning to have a breakdown. One of them is crying. One of them is complaining all the time. Did the other prisoners give them support to say, just a hug, say, come on, let's pull through this together? There was none of that. We put microphones hidden in the cells, and prisoners did not give support to other prisoners who were beginning to have emotional breakdown. And so that really is one of the most terrible things in this study that I don't talk about a lot, is that prisoners never gave social support, encouragement to fellow prisoners in their own cell. So each cell was like a family, if you will. And it's almost as if once a prisoner began to have a breakdown, the other prisoners abandoned him to say, you're on your own now. Next.
Thank you. We won't take too many questions on Stanford Prison Experiment, but there is, of course, the question you were expecting about replicating it or having it done with females, possibly, or also some people asked about if it had also been done with racial minorities, what you expect the effects would be.
Yeah, so obviously you would want to replicate the study with women. And in fact, I applied at Stanford to do it, to say, let's do the study with female college students playing the role of prisoners and guards, everybody involved being female. And of course, the Human Subject Committee said, your study now has been judged to be unethical, and no research can ever be done again, which puts participants under such extreme stress. And so the Milgram study and the Zimbardo study together said no live participants are allowed to suffer stress or any form of, let's say, social embarrassment ever again. So the interesting thing is to conjecture, and I put it out to all the group here. How do you think women would have behaved if they were guards in my study, and the prisoners were women? So it's interesting to speculate what what do you think would happen, and why? Why would women be different than men? So as I said, in the Milgram study, he ran one group, study 13. Women did the same thing as men, but that was only in a short time. Here, if you were women guards and you're working with other women 8 hours a day, would you be more supportive than hostile? So that I put that question out to all of the students here. Next.
Thank you, Professor Zimbardo. We also have a question from Pelin Ertem.
Hello, where are you?
Hello, Dr. Zimbardo.
Greetings.
Thank you for your presentation. It's an honor to have you here among us. So my question is about actually social media heroism. All of us, I believe all of us are speaking up against the injustices we see on social media and in everyday life. But do you think it really affects us positively or negatively in taking real action?
No, I don't know. That's again, a lot of good questions. The answer is we don't know. We should, when psychologists say we don't know, say someone should do research on it, so that we know all the negatives of cyberbullying. But what about having positive social models on the internet? What about now? See, people, it's very hard for us to put ourselves out to say, hey, I'd like everybody to know that I just helped somebody. So for example, I use my own money to take elderly people to get vaccinated. I did this 5 hours every day. That is, most of us feel reluctant to put ourselves forward in this way. So that's why we need somebody else to say, hey, you know what Phil Zimbardo did? So we need role models in social media who are doing good things every day and are not calling attention to themselves, but other people are. So again, it's important for all of us, all of you, to share with your friends things that you are doing positively. And then it's up to your friends if they want to share that with the general public. So for example, I know I communicate regularly with a woman who's across the country. She just writes to me. She's been writing it. She likes my textbooks and reading, and she tells me that she's relatively poor and spends several hours every day of driving elderly people to get vaccinations. And then when she has an old car, the car breaks down, she tries to take them in a taxi, but it's too expensive. So what I'm trying to do is get people in that community to support her, to give her money, or to get cab taxis to give rides for free. If an elderly person, it's a short distance, you're riding them within the city to get a vaccination, which they need. But it's really, how can we get social media to be more pro-social? Really good question.
Thank you. We also have a question from Senaz Alton. If you can ask maybe your first question. I think there were 2 questions.
Okay, first one. First of all, thank you for a great presentation. It's a great pleasure to meet and talk with you. So we have been talking about extraordinary situation, but a neutral situation, neutral condition. What make people to hesitate to avoid evil and direct to good in a regular basis? Is it because just societal norms and expectations, or do you believe that people are innately good?
Yeah, I'd like to believe, I want to believe that people are more innately good than innately bad, for sure. But I think goodness comes out in the practice of actions. So you can't, if I ask you, are you a good or a bad person? you know, you say, I'm not a bad person, but if you say I'm a good person, then my next question is, what did you do to make you think that? So that for me, goodness is a set of social actions. So if you think about, you know, what did you do during the pandemic? That is, did you do any good deeds during the pandemic? And so some people say, yeah, every day I call my parents that are living in a different city, or every day I called elderly people in the house I live in to see if they would like me to go shopping for them. So here we're talking about goodness as actions, as social actions that make the world bearable or better for other people. So that would be my definition. And then when you do these on a regular basis, it becomes what we call a habit. So you don't think about it, you just do it. So when I said earlier in my presentation is that the importance of giving compliments. Compliments are a verbal way of telling other people that you respect them or something about them. We don't give compliments very often. It feels awkward. Again, I was a teacher for many years, and I was really a good teacher. I mean, I put my heart and soul into every single lecture. I was always available. I had office hours where I would sit outside my office for, so students would feel awkward to come in, and I would have tea or coffee or whatever. And again, I love students. Very few students ever gave me a compliment. Very few. In fact, sometimes 20 or 30 years later, somebody will write to me and say, I was in your class in 1987, this class, it changed my whole life. I'm now working in this job. And I write back and I say, thank you. Your compliment made me feel good. Why did you wait 30 years? Suppose I was dead. Your compliment would be wasted. Why didn't you tell me after the class? You know, so again, students should be, I'm saying all of you, students should be complimenting teachers who go beyond just regular teaching, who do something special. But also compliments should become a habit. You do it all the time, to friends, to family, to your mother. You say, that was a really delicious dinner tonight, Mom, thank you. Or anybody who helps you in any way. Compliments are a habit that creates a positive social bond. And as psychologists, this is what we should be doing and practicing and encouraging other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. And I have to give a quick compliment because I have to say that moderating this event is one of the highlights of my professional career as a social psychologist. So thank you very much for that.
That's great. That is wonderful.
I really appreciate it.
We probably have time for a few more. Then I got to get back to work.
Of course, we don't want to take too much of your time, your very valuable time. Thank you. We do have a question from Ayşenur Karkın.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting that. Great. Okay. I am a PhD student at Koç University, and one of my professors is now looking for the phenomena worry to lead. So people nowadays are more and more worried about being in the leading positions, you know, like, or when you look at the political parties, some people are not that willing to be in the leading role of the party. And I was thinking the same thing, like, can we also see that worry to be a hero? Because thinking the circumstances we are living under right now, some people may have the same type of worry to be hero. And do you think there are some reasons to be like, to worry to be a hero in these days, like more than maybe before when you compare?
Oh yeah, well, I can't compare because there's no research on it, but again, it's leaders. It's a separate phenomena to be a leader, so again, there's really not that we really have to even do more research on what does it mean for someone to choose to be a leader. It means I'm going to be visible. I'm going to be individuated. I'm going to make myself different than other people. I'm going to do things to make others notice me. And then ideally, I will have the attributes, the habits, the qualities that people admire and say, okay, yeah, we're going to let him or her take the lead in this psychology club, in this the city election, or in our national election. For many people, they don't want the obligation. To be a leader is an obligation, because you have, if you're a leader, you have one or more followers, and that it's, to be a good leader is work. I mean, it's not like, oh, people say, oh, you're the captain of the team. So not everybody wants to be a leader, but the alternative is, do you really want to be a follower? So again, I want all of you to think about, if you have to choose between one or two positions in life, would you rather be a leader or a follower? Very few people say, yeah, I want to be a follower. I'm going to follow what other people tell me to do. But then if you're going to be a leader, you have to say, well, I'm willing to give it a try. Okay. So I will try to be the leader in small groups. I mean, even, let's say you have a research group. Let's say a number of you, 3 or 4, are doing research project. Clearly, someone has to take the initiative to say, why don't we meet at my house? Or why don't we do this? Or why don't you do part A and you do part B? So leaders help organize situations and the abilities of other people in order to achieve a desirable outcome. So again, in my own life, when I was a child, I mentioned I was hospital. When I came out of the hospital, I was very skinny and weak. And I used to get beaten up all the time by big kids. Also because I looked Jewish. I had blue eyes and I had a big nose and I was very skinny. That was the image of a Jew. And in this neighborhood, there were no Jews. Jews lived in other parts of New York City. And I used to get beaten up all the time. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand how kids could do this. And then, so it's not only being discriminated against, but then when they found out I was Catholic and not Jewish, they apologized. They said, okay, you could be part of the group. But then it was clear I was at the bottom of the social ladder. And it was clear that kids who were the leader, they did something great. They always said, why don't we do this? And it would be doing something that they could do. And not everybody else in the group could do that. So I said as a kid, gee, I'd rather be a leader than a follower, because then you make the decisions. You could always get the group to do things that are interesting for you, at least, rather than you're a follower and you have to do things that are boring, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for 2 more questions? Is that okay?
Sure. 2 more.
Okay. Great. Just because we have a really interesting question about culture as well. So how should the criteria set by society for evil be evaluated interculturally?
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a complex question. How shall I begin to even answer that? I mean, some kinds of evil are judged universally. That is, let's say, at least in the past, let's say treatment of women. In some societies, women were denigrated, women were used, women were objects of male desire, of male dominance. And so one value would be the equality of all people, regardless of agenda, and then extend that to regardless of race. And so there should be some values, some standards that are cross-cultural. That is, the intrinsic value of individual life is regardless of gender. It's regardless of beauty. It's regardless of physical stature, regardless of then gender, race, ethnicity. So the question is, how can there be some standards which are not culture bound, which are, let's say, call it culture free, but now we have cultures that have for years, let's say in many Muslim cultures, women are still second class status. It's only recently that women were allowed to drive a car. Women were allowed to have jobs, so women's rights, I'll focus on that, have been evolving still in many countries. But if you look at all the statistics, what percent of women are on heading corporate boards? What percent of women are in charge of foundations, et cetera? In most countries, even in the United States, I assume in Turkey, there is still not gender equality to anywhere near the extent that I think it should be. So again, it's I think what's critical for all of us is to say, what are the kinds of things that are happening in my society which I think are not acceptable? And it could be men saying this about it's not acceptable for women not to be treated as equals. And early we said in America, finally, Black people are saying, we have been mistreated for centuries in America. We started out as slaves working for white people. And then even we were legally emancipated, we are still at the bottom of the social ladder. And with that comes poverty, with that comes lack of access to education, lack of access to good jobs, et cetera.
Thank you so much for that complicated answer. The very last question that we have for you is, what is one of the greatest lessons that you've learned after working on human nature for more than 60 years?
Oh, I would say 80 years, because I was a child psychologist. As a child, I was always observing things. That people are good, that people are perfectible, that humans learn from having good examples in their family, in their neighborhood, in their community. That one of the values of psychology is teaching students to appreciate variations in human nature. So I think for me, understanding psychology, doing research in psychology, teaching psychology, has made me a better person to the extent that it increases my value of my kin, and that in a funny way, the world is my kin. I mean, I feel connected with each and every one of you, even though we are physically distant, and hopefully sometime I could go back to Turkey. I should mention, I visited Turkey maybe a decade ago. I was invited to open a new university on the opening day, and then I was housed in a faculty residence, but there were no faculty there. So students came and said, "Hey, do you want to tour the city?" I'd never been in Turkey, and I said, "Oh, sure." So I went with a group of students around the city, going to student restaurants, students teaching me how to smoke hookah, and then they discovered that I actually met the famous Turkish psychologist Mustafa Sharif when I was a graduate student in 1957. He visited Yale, and he was working with my advisor, and I did a dissertation related to attitude change and social influence based on his theory and Leon Festiger's dissonance theory. So I have deep caring for Turkey and for Turkish people in general, and especially all of the Turkish, in quote, intellectuals that I was fortunate to meet then and now to meet here with all of you.
Well, we thank you so much for this wonderful and inspiring talk.
I got to stretch out. I got to make this look. Okay. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And we welcome you to Turkey anytime. Once pandemic is over, I'm sure there are over 1,200 people who would be more than happy to show you anything in this beautiful country.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
And thank you, Psychology Club, too, for inviting Professor Zimbardo to speak with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before going.